Join me in welcoming Azeez Gupta, who's the co-founder of Rocket Learning.
I started Rocket Learning along with my other co-founders back in 2020. And the mission that we started with that still continues and we've sharpened it over the years is that can we help make the next generation of India's kids smarter? So I think one anganwadi worker story that will always sort of stay in my mind. This lady called Seema Rani, what we sort of saw, right? This lady in Jodhpur, and she was saying to me कि मैं 30 साल से सेंटर को चला रही हूँ. In fact, मेरे जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनके पेरेंट्स को भी मैं नहीं पढ़ाया. 30 साल में किसी ने मुझे आके नहीं पूछा. One of the things that we thought very deeply about in the beginning was whether to set up a for-profit or a not-for-profit. Some of us had come from a for-profit background. I think mentally saying that we will do a non-profit was very hard. What gives me the kick in doing something like this is a combination of things. One is the mission and motivation. So I think at an abstract level, that happiness is there.
Hello. Before we get started with this episode, I quickly wanted to share that we are now a part of the Zerodha Media Network. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host Jivraj, and today I have with me a supremely exciting guest. Join me in welcoming Azeez Gupta, who's the co-founder of Rocket Learning. Thank you so much, Azeez, for joining me. Very excited to be hosting you today.
Thanks for having me, Jivraj, and yeah, really looking forward to this conversation. Big follower of your podcast over the years.
And that's super kind of you to mention because when I was preparing for the conversation, I realized that, your model is super unique. I'd heard of the model from a couple of people. We've hosted Ashish Dhawan. So when I was diving deeper into CSF, I realized that, this is one of the grants that they've done in the past. So super interested in what you're building because, typically I cover all of these capitalistic stories which have done well on a profitable level, but Rocket Learning is impacting grassroots education in a way that is very difficult to otherwise capture. And the impact and the gratitude must be very, very fulfilling, I'm sure. So I want to hear very, very deeper learnings from that journey. I'm also very fascinated by your personal sort of journey of, having high quality education. You've been an IIT Delhi graduate, you've studied at HBS as well afterwards. In the middle, there was a McKinsey stint. So you've been a part of these premier institutions and now you're impacting education at a place where premium is very undefined, right? And access is itself a question, let alone premium being the ask. So I'd love to know the entire ambit. Where I want to start, Azeez, is by understanding the ambit of what Rocket Learning covers. So for those who may not be aware, if you can quickly give us a preview of how you got started, what the mission is, and where you are today, I think that'll be a great starting point, and then we'll go deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started Rocket Learning along with my other co-founders back in 2020. So it's been 4 years of the journey so far. And the mission that we started with that still continues and we've sharpened it over the years is that can we help make the next generation of India's kids smarter?
Sure.
Right? So that is the idea. Can you make, the whole country? So India today has an IQ of about 87 for adults, right?
Okay.
The developed world IQ average is 97. Right? 87, 97.
So we're 10 points behind.
We're 10 points behind, and I don't think anyone will say that it's because Indians fundamentally have lower IQ or anything of that sort. By the way, the IQ definition also is hated by educators. So any educators who see are going to be, why you fixate it. But I think I use it as a useful number to be able to say that there is some reason why we are a little bit behind than our developed nation counterparts, and similarly why poorer kids in India are behind their higher income counterparts, right? And the reason for that is the stimulation and nutrition you get by the age of 6. So there's a lot of neuroscience that has actually shown that 85% of brain development, and by the way, the National Education Policy of 2020 says that 85% of brain development is happening by the age of 6. Right? So the sort of food and nutrition you get on one side probably is responsible for 5 of those IQ point differential. And the stimulation and learning that you get from 0 to 6 is responsible for the other half, right? So I've donned a lot of social impact hats in my life. I trained vocational training to youth, right? Help them get jobs. And in the middle skill, India was such a big deal and there was so much talk, and it's still important. I do believe it changes things. And then I've worked a lot in primary school education as well. But at each of these points, I felt that children, or youth that I'm interacting with have already fallen way behind. So while I'm helping them with particular skills and helping them get to particular points, but fundamentally they're not as bright as they could be or should be.
There's a disadvantage already.
And in fact, that's the biggest unfairness of it all. At the age of 6, you're telling a whole generation of poorer kids in India that no matter what you do after this, no matter how much work you put in, you are going to be behind others. So that's the mission. How we do it is that we engage with the government system at scale. right? And we use technology at scale as well. And this is only possible in the last 5 years, right? Because before that, and for 70 years, the same playbook has been used, that there are operational centers on ground, or there's feet on street that go and you teach some kids and you come back. And you may teach from time to time, and but over the last 5 years, now we see that 80% of rural households whose kids go to government schools have a smartphone. And all teachers and anganwadi workers are this powerhouse cadre of all women daycare workers in the community, paid for by the government. So all teachers and anganwadi workers have smartphones as well. And so, in a nutshell, what we did is to create digital communities of these anganwadi teachers, as well as digital communities of parents, give them simple content to help them teach kids better, reward them, gamify it using big data, and make it easy for them and more fun for them to carry out their life's work, right? So that's what we did, and basically we're in the business of behavior change, but we're doing it for a segment, bottom 40% of India, that nobody else cares about, and that is the fun of it.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so nice to hear, because the gravity of the problem, as you mentioned, is immense, and we need somebody and more people like you to focus on it. And if I'm not wrong, now there are like 1 million children which have been touched via the program, 70,000 plus WhatsApp groups I was reading at some place, some 1 lakh plus parents which have been impacted. Talk to us about how you've seen some of this transformation play out, right? Now you've had the benefit of hindsight to say that, okay, in 5 years, in 4 years, you've seen some amount of the program play out. What is the transformational change that you have seen in the lives of some of this? And in education, everybody talks about, quantifying outcomes, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into the jargon of it, but how do you personally and at Rocket Learning, what is the North Star that you folks are chasing in terms of quantification?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think, in fact, the latest stats are that we are currently working with 200,000 preschool centers, these anganwadi centers. So that's roughly about 7% of all of India's preschools, rich or poor, urban or rural, right? So we're at that. I think over the next 5 years, the goal is to hit about 40% of all of India's preschools, all through the government system. We're not touching the private sector right now. But I think, how we've seen this journey evolve over the years is actually going from problem to problem. Actually started with COVID and engaging the parents of these kids, and then seeing anganwadi workers organically pick it up, which was a huge aha moment for me. And then saying, oh, let us add the anganwadi workers to the loop, to the model as well. And so starting to work with these parents and anganwadi workers and seeing this big pull. So I'll talk later about how we actually, in the impact space, people don't think about market entry as a strategy, or where to go, what are the people playing there, what is the outside momentum in this space. People will find a problem and they will go gung-ho at it, not thinking about any of these other factors, because you're going out of it out of passion, out of mission. But we actually followed a pretty for-profit approach in some sense, in terms of identifying that this is where we want to spend the next 10 years of our lives. Though the goal was sort of impact and not dollars, but that's what we sort of followed. From a quantification perspective, we actually try very hard to try and quantify impact, because end of the day, the opportunity cost for us is our lifetime. All right, and we're not making the money we could in the private sector. I make probably about 25% of what my classmates are making. So for me, it's even more important that what I'm doing has to have meaning. Right? And I'm not going to become famous. I'm on this podcast, but I'm not going to be a Sachin Bansal eventually. Even if I reach the scale, even if I reach that pinnacle of non-profit impact success, I'm not going to reach that scale. Right? So impact is the thing. So we measure learning outcomes for kids at that age. It's things like, of course, IQ is like the easy way to understand, but effectively you're trying to measure literacy and numeracy at the early stages. You're trying to measure cognitive ability, ability to make patterns, shapes, senses, colors, recognize, sort, pattern matching, all of that. You're looking at executive function, working memory, ability to break down tasks, self-regulation and self-control. It's quite fascinating, because none of us think that these things are getting developed in childhood. But interestingly, the amount of adults we all know, if you give a big problem to them, how many of them are actually able to break it out into bits? So the gap actually starts in early childhood, because that's when the neuroscience is building, and that's when all the connections are sort of forming. And that's when you realize that, okay, if I have to make a bunch of blocks or utensils, I have to create a stack of utensils, then I have to do this, then I have to do that, then I have to do trial and error, then I have to do that. Then I make the stack. If I don't get that stimulation early, as an older person, I can't do that equivalent. But quantitatively, we actually measure kids before we start working with them. Then we measure kids after we have worked with them, we worked with MIT, Poverty Action Lab, JPAL, the Nobel Prize winning organization, and so on. And they've done a randomized control trial on our work where, they've looked at a control group where nothing was happening. I mean, the government system was running, but we were not supporting the government system. And a set where we were supporting the government system. And they saw a very high differential in terms of learning outcomes at the rate of sort of 0.2 standard deviation. But fundamentally, how we like to frame our studies is that 50% of kids are at achieving a school readiness or life readiness level naturally. And thanks to us, about 70% get there. And we want to drive that up.
No, that's phenomenal. I think the scale of impact there is just incredible to understand. I want to go deeper into how you make this happen, but maybe let's take a step back. I think one of the major things I want to uncover through this conversation is also understand the mindset of how you with all the chops at your disposal. So you have great education, you have a great career, you go to the best B school in the country, yet you decide to pursue the non-profit social entrepreneurship path at an age where you could question that you've not achieved the pinnacle of capitalistic success. So what is the mindset, right? Talk to us about the mindset pre-starting rocket learning, and also the construct of the 5 of you coming together is super fascinating, right? Because it's not just like 1 or 2 people coming together to be like, okay, this is what we've always thought we want to do. It's a group of really smart people coming together, and then the following team as well. And then I have ancillary questions, of course, but I'd love to understand the mindset, and if you can, through that mindset, explain some of the trade-offs you had to make. You referred to that briefly, and the value of impact, how you define it. I think foundationally that'll be very important, because we tend to, I think, including myself, tend to like aspire for capitalistic success, right? You've chosen a radically different path. Why have you chosen so? Will be really nice to understand.
Right. Yeah, I think few things there, right? I think what gives me the kick in doing something like this is a combination of things. One is the mission and motivation, right? I mean, yeah, I'm happy if I feel that children are becoming more confident, smarter, better in their lives, if their parents and their teachers are feeling more equipped and confident in terms of how they can engage the kids. So I think at an abstract level, that happiness is there. That said, most of my job is actually analyzing, managing, leading, sitting in a desk in Bangalore, doing calls, getting stressed out. So it's very much like running a for-profit startup, honestly.
Right. So the day-to-day is very similar.
Day-to-day is very similar. And I think no matter how mission-focused you are, if you're not enjoying the day-to-day, then you're not going to do anything with the mission.
Correct.
I mean, you will burn out in 5 years and you'll go away. So I think for me, a big thing was figuring out that this is what I enjoy. I like being an operator.
Okay.
So I think that was one big learning for me in my life early on. After McKinsey, in McKinsey I had a couple of projects actually. One was a research project with the McKinsey Global Institute. A lot of intellectual thinking, a lot of analysis, loved it, but felt that I'm still too far away from the action. I'm releasing a very good report, but I can't see where this is sort of going. And then another was an ops study where I'm on the shop floor every day and I'm really like getting my hands dirty, but again felt that this is too short term, this is too sort of. And then sort of came to this sort of thing that leading an organization, managing an organization, that is what I love, because I can have that strategy piece, that intellectual sort of itch can be satisfied with the element of leading and making things happen, right? So the operator bit was the first sort of aha for me. I moved from McKinsey to Pratham, which is a very large Indian non-profit, got a huge opportunity to lead very large teams there. At 25, I was leading a team of 1,200 people. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity at that point. And that sort of told me that, look, I want to be an operator going forward. Now, mission is one of the motivating factors for sure. My family has a history of public service. Grandparents, parents have all been in government, in the civil services. I've grown up in some of the smaller towns of the country. So I've had that privilege of sort of seeing, and in fact, my co-founder and sister Namya actually says this, that in India, you can't ignore poverty. I mean, you can't miss poverty, that it's there. You can see it and you can ignore it, or you can do something about it, but you know it is there.
Yeah.
And so for us, I think we always had this countercultural family pressure of doing something about it. Rather than saying, why are you not going to Goldman Sachs, or why are you not going to Sequoia and becoming a partner? So not to say those are not fine things, those are wonderful things themselves.
Of course.
So I wanted to do that from that perspective. I also really like the intellectual challenge of trying to solve problems that are 75 years in the making and solving and have not been solved. Right? I mean, at McKinsey, I liked the work I did, but fundamentally, I felt that there's a playbook. I'm smart. I can break down a problem. it's been done in one company, it can be done in another company.
Yeah, it was repeatable.
It's very repeatable.
Yeah.
And here the solutions are not repeatable. There's no
all.
playbook.
Yeah.
What
not
am I
been
going to
done
copy?
before.
It's not been done. I'm making it as I go, and I'm making it by the seat of my pants, honestly. I'm scaling, I'm innovating, it's combining, I'm selling while I'm not even fully sure about what's leading out of it, right? And it's 4 years later that we know that what we're doing is working, but the first 1 or 2 years, the jury was out.
Yeah.
So I think that intellectual challenge was damn cool. So I think, to summarize, I think the intellectual challenge of solving these problems, the mission kick that you get, and the day-to-day sort of happiness of being an operator, but all of this only works if you have privilege. And I am very privileged in the sense that, my family is not rich, but they are well off enough that they can take care of themselves. So I don't have to sort of do support them, right? I went to business school, and business school gave me a big scholarship and is paying off my loan, and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, I can take care of myself. And now today, India's social sector or even global social sector is able to pay enough that I will not be rich, but I will not be lacking for money. I can go and have a holiday and go if I want to. I will not be in Jhola and with a katori, right? So that way.
Tell us more about that, because I think outside in the perspective is also that choosing a non-profit part is a binary journey to saying that, hey, wealth-wise you are doing extremely badly. What is the reality of that bit?
Yeah, I'll share. So basically, by the way, one route that I have, when I was young, I never considered it. Now I think it's quite interesting, is the Azeez Dhawan route, right? And Azeez chairs our board. He's a mentor and a friend, right? Made a wildly successful private equity career, and then came into impact, came with those connections and those resources, and has achieved phenomenal things, right? So what I am betting, right? Fundamentally, what I bet at 25 is that I will achieve that same level of success from 24 to 50 without taking that corporate route and then coming back. Right? And that's rare. Most people have chosen to do the corporate one, right? Like Bill Gates is another example globally.
Of course.
Right? And I'm not saying I will have that level of impact, but I'm taking the bet that I will make a meaningful dent in the world from that perspective. So I think that is one sort of reflection. I still feel the reason I did it is because I enjoy my day-to-day so much that I felt that if I stay 5-10 years away from the day-to-day of making a social enterprise, that will be 5 to 10 years that I will not enjoy in my life. So it was a very selfish decision at the end of the day. And my wife keeps telling me that you should, if you had gone to private equity, you would have made this money. That I said it probably would have been very bad at private equity. But for me, it was very selfish that I want to do what I enjoy. From a monetary perspective, I think if you're a very successful social entrepreneur, then you will probably earn a few lakhs a month, easily enough, if you're very successful. Say 5 to 10 lakhs over time, and it will not be in the beginning. In the beginning, when I started, it was less than a lakh a month. Right? I'm sharing the numbers because I think people should know sort of where you.
I really appreciate that because it puts it into context in a really granular manner.
Yeah, exactly. So I think people should know, right? And I am actually quite lucky that I even started off at that point. A lot of people who don't have my connections and my privilege and who haven't done maybe the 5-7 years of entrepreneurship, social sector leadership I had done before I started Rocket Learning, don't even have that, right? But eventually you will get to say 5 to 10 lakhs, but you will peak. You will not keep going up and up and up and eventually have carry in your fund or have a huge exit to get out of. And my wife runs a for-profit business, and that's where I am hoping to get that money. But I'm satisfied even if she doesn't get that, because in my life I know that is more than enough money for me. In my life I've never spent more than I spend always like 50% or 30% of this number that I'm quoting, right? So what do I need this money for, honestly? And I don't have a high bar for material possessions, etc. So I want to enjoy my life. I want to travel a bit. I want to be able to sort of hang out with my friends. That's my bar. So I think everybody has to figure out their own monetary bar, right? But if you come in saying that you will in your life as a social impact entrepreneur earn 100 crores, not going to happen. But if you come in and say that I will earn sort of, 20-30 crores over a life, it could happen. But you have to be successful.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to sort of take that thing in that way.
No, I think that's super, super interesting. What I'm hearing is if you have the privilege to not have dependency, and if you do enjoy and thrive in, operating and building a social enterprise, and can be true about the monetary aspect of life, you can really pursue what you want. In fact, we've had the pleasure of hosting Azeez Dhawan, and one of the things he mentioned was that he would have actually like to start earlier, right? Not wait for the Chris journey to actually start the philanthropic endeavors he's on currently. And that was a great cue, because he was like, hey, you don't have to be successful to start and start giving, right? You can actually do that earlier. And in fact, your journey is an example of that. So I'm glad that we're being able to vocalize this.
And just to add, if I talk about my co-founders as well, different people have different sort of journeys, right? So I started 2 years after my McKinsey career. I knew I was going to do it immediately. My co-founder Siddhant actually did his MBA, did 4-5 years at BCG, became quite senior and came in there. And he's loving it now, but he put together some nest egg, right? That made him feel the comfort and
you protect your downside.
Yeah, so I think everybody has a different level of where their career, their sort of downsides are, of what makes them feel comfortable at the back of their mind, right? In that way. So my CTO Vishal actually came in at a very different point in his career. So I think I wouldn't sort of judge and say that this is the right time or whatever, right? There are all sorts of options. So in fact, there are many people I counsel saying, who want to come right out of college. I say, okay, please go and work for some time. Or I talk to them and I understand their family circumstances, and I say, please don't put this sort of pressure on yourself, on your family. You have a long career ahead of you. There is plenty of time. When I was younger, I was thinking, there's not enough time if I waste 5 years. And now I think back and say, I could have done something else for 5 years and come. It won't be the end of the world. So that's what I would advise people. That don't stress about it. There's a lot of time. But figure out your sort of financial downsides, financial baseline.
Got it. No, I think this is helpful. Yeah, I mean, so no rush, figure out your context. And if this is the journey you want to pursue, there are enough and more examples now that you can take the path and be successful and not miss out on whatever the other capitalistic success might look like. On the co-founders, how do you think of, conventional wisdom says that, have 2-3 folks because 4-5 may be too many. All of you are extremely, talented in your own ways. How did this come about? Whose idea was it? What is the construct in general that you think about works well? And what is the context specifically that worked well for Rocket Learning?
Yeah. 5 co-founders is a unique construct. It's not easy to sort of have and you generally don't see it for a couple of reasons. One is in for-profits, the more co-founders you have, the more equity split you need to do. Advantage of a non-profit, right? There are not that many, but one of the advantages is that there's no equity split. All right. What you do have to split though is A, decision making, right, and B, you have to split the prominence that comes with it. Right. So those two things I think also there in the for-profit space. So I would say for any entrepreneur, right, I would actually think that even for for-profits, equity should be the least of your worries. If you do well, you will earn a lot of money regardless, right? Aapke 33% hai, 40% hai, it will not matter very much.
In the large scheme of things.
But where I see the frustration happening among my sort of other founder friends, and I'm sort of in this huge community of various founders, is that, you have to adjust to each other and you have to make sure that you have to take the other person along. With 5 people, you have to take all 5 along. So all of us knew each other in different ways. Some from IT background. My co-founder was my neighbor in Bangalore and was already a social entrepreneur, wanted to figure out the next step. One of my co-founders, my sibling. So that was obviously easy thing to have. But effectively, we all looked at that, are we overall aligned in a mission and sort of approach? So all of us were aligned on a few things. We wanted to get to scale. We wanted to move fast. We wanted to measure what we were doing very well, right? We wanted to build an organization with a great culture, right? So in that way, we had a lot of alignment there. And then within that, we have had a lot of arguments over time on small bits of strategy, etc., etc. But because we were aligned on these broader things, nobody wanted to come and say that, oh, why are we expanding to 200,000 anganwadis? Why not spend 3 years working with 5,000? Right? So I think that alignment we did early on. All right, and in an early stage company, any company, not just not for profit, talent is the biggest issue. So for us, we even for the first 3 years or 2.5 years, we did not bite off ever more than we could chew. We could always chew. We always had a bench. We were doing stuff, but we always like it. ठीक है, ये कर, इसके बाद थोड़ा सा time है, ये कर लेगा, right? And we were all driving ourselves crazy, but we had that bench. It was only sort of 2.5 years later that we then felt that even for the 5 hours is too much, and then we built a whole second line of leaders who are as good as we are, and all of that. But basically, it's the founders who take that bet early on, and that raw talent sort of then sees you through the first couple of years especially. After that, again, founders have the pulse of the organization, of the sector, what they bring just because of virtue of being founders and having that position is often more than what others can, because you don't have that vantage view. But the first sort of couple of years are important. So yeah, so we had basically no equity to worry about, and we were aligned on strategy vision. We had to put a lot of credit in the love bank throughout. So love bank is something one of our funders told us about, right? That when times are good, you put credit in the love bank. You be close. You sort of try to hang out. You try to respect each other. So I think that was one big thing. So that when times are bad, you trust each other. Second is we actually all operate by consensus. We don't have a CEO.
Yeah.
So we try to take decisions together, and we don't do it by some democracy where it is 3-2, so 3-1 wins. We try to come to a common solution.
Sure.
I personally believe that's a good way of doing it, because then blind spots get caught, and overall a good answer emerges. You could also again, you have to still have the guts to be able to make push for big changes when you want to make big changes. Obviously, a drawback can be that you might try to average out everywhere. But I think if you're conscious of that, you can sort of overcome it. So you have to make sure that the decision making is collective. You also have to make sure everybody gets some space. If I am the person going and representing everywhere and everybody only knows me and says that rocket learning is ABC, or they only know one of my co-founders and say this is that, especially in a non-profit, that's a very hard one, right? Because you are doing it for the mission, but you also want to get some recognition, right? Very honestly, that is that gives you some satisfaction, and so you not only have to share that, which is not easy, because you may see a lot of people with a single founder where that founder is everywhere, and here none of us will be sort of as well known, as famous, etc. But we are seeing that that's able to drive us in a position where we hope to be the most impactful organization in the country. Right, and over the next 5 years. So it's worth the trade-off that way.
That's lovely. I think very, very well explained in terms of the nuances, and I can attest to the last part, because as I was researching for the episode, I came across conversations with all of you co-founders, right? There was one panel in which Utsav was there was one episode in which you and your co-founder was there was one in which Namya was there, so it was really diverse in nature. So now that you mentioned it, I could just connect the dots.
We try hard to do that, and it takes deliberate focus also, because somebody may naturally get some inbounds, and then they may go for the inbounds, and those inbounds will generate more inbounds. I'm on Silicon Valley, then somebody will come and say, oh, I loved you in that episode with Jivraj, will you come speak with me? And we actually say that, and even otherwise, we say that, I think this person would be the best person to talk on this topic. So just because you invite me doesn't mean I'm going to go. Right. And even for awards and so on, actually we made a big push within the social impact ecosystem to say that, because often social impact funders will say that choose one person. And we say कि आप खुद बोलते हो कि talent नहीं मिलता है इस space में. In fact, even for profits in the early days, you don't get talent, man. And then you say कि नहीं, but we want to lionize or make one person the head honcho, the boss, look at them as the boss, right? So you need to have a little bit of a collective decision making, and that comes with collective recognition also.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, I think, because if aspiration is also spread out, we have more role models, and then the younger generation can also look up to different people as opposed to just a singular one. One thing I'd love to know from you, Azeez, is like when building the team, one of the things I was thinking coming up to the conversation was, how do you test for impact? Because it's one of those tricky things that is difficult to evaluate in, like, let's say, a 1 hour conversation or even from past experiences, right? So and I'm guessing that's one of the prerequisites of building out the team, right? Because if you're not impact focused, it becomes difficult to work for the cause that you are going forward. So do you have a mental model to say that, okay, this is what comprises of somebody who's chasing impact versus this is what it may not?
Yeah, I've been in the impact space now for 10 years and hired probably 200 people in that. It's a very hard thing to do, honestly, to figure out, who is actually chasing impact, who is not. And answers are not necessarily one-dimensional also.
Of course, yeah.
We have many people who go to masters after a 2-year stint with us.
Yeah.
I have personally recommended a lot of people who gone to HPS, to Stanford, Wharton, etc. And they really care about the impact, but they also are using it as a stepping stone. And what's wrong with that? Right? Eventually, if you're motivated, if you're doing good work, then that is totally fair, right? In other cases, you can see a little bit. You see like really amazing people earning a lot, doing a lot, and ready to come in at pay cuts. So with a lot of our senior team, we do that also. At least test in the beginning with pay cuts. Even though we eventually do want to bring them on industry standard, that's also a very core philosophy of ours. Yeah. We can't pay peanuts and expect to not get monkeys, right? I mean, that's the phrase, I think, right? So But initially, if you're ready to come in at a bit of a pay cut and to come in sort of role that may not be totally up your alley and so on and do it, I think that helps us also to understand what the impact focus is like. To some extent, there is self-selection. People who come to us do come in a little bit from the purpose of creating impact. But now, as we are giving more so in the early days it was easy. We were not paying much, so people who came had. Now it is harder because now we're paying industry standard. So a lot of people who are coming in are saying, look, this is a step on my career journey. And to some extent, I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think culturally, at least, they have to fit. And we've seen examples where it's not a fit. In fact, I will cop out and say that it's very hard to assess when you're paying industry standard. What you need to be able to do better is that to understand that in 3 months, that this person really doesn't care much about the impact and they're not a culture fit, and get them out. So that genuinely happens, and we're having to sort of nudge people out. Sometimes we have 400 people in the team, and so people come who are not fits. So moving them out quickly is important both for them and for us.
Got it. No, that's helpful. I think this has been really nice. I think this segment. I want to come back to the Rocket Learning business model because it seems like a very fascinating operational challenge as well. While all of your programs are digital first and you operate through digital communities, you still have to develop a lot of empathy, understand what's happening on ground. You deal with multiple stakeholders, including the government, the anganwadi providers, the parents, these children. I'd love to know how you look at tell us everything apart from the education. The education is the part that we get to see. That's the thing that gets delivered, which is fairly straightforward to understand. However, the backend is something that remains to be a black box, right? So what is the operational challenge? How do you deal with multiple stakeholders? I'd love if you can give us a complete breakdown of how it happens.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as you said, I think the education and the pedagogy and curriculum is critical, but still it's easy to understand. Right? There's some playful learning activities that children have to do. Now the challenge is getting them done by somebody or the other, right? And identifying who that person is, what are their incentives, how do you nudge them in that way? So I think one of the things we've always thought of from the very beginning is that we have to work with governments. We don't want to set up a parallel system where we are sending our own people to go and teach and train, because then you are not going to get to the country level changing scale that we wanted to get to. Now government is also not a monolith, and there are many different sort of incentives in the game as well, right? So there is a state government officer that may be in the mix who may have their own sort of priorities. There may be a teacher or a educator who may have their own priorities. There may be a parent in the mix who has to do some stuff, and not just their own priorities and incentives, but also their skills, their confidence levels on different things, right? So I think the key thing is identifying that and understanding who to tackle, when not to tackle. So, for example, till 5 years ago, I would not get into early childhood education, but the National Education Policy came in 2020, and they came and said that you have to do this. Right? Anganwadis have to evolve from Dalia centers, khane ki jagah, to also being padhai ki jagah. Now, what that led to is WCD departments, Women and Child Development Ministries across the country, who had evolved to be very focused on nutrition in these centers, also being told कि boss कुछ करके आपको education भी यहाँ करना है.
So they needed a solution.
They didn't have anybody. Education departments across the country have lines of NGOs who are working on foundation literacy and numeracy, who are working on middle school education. You can't go to an office without bumping into 5 people that you know जो वहीं बैठे हैं. WCD there is nobody there, and WCD also doesn't have people internally who have expertise in education. So while in education departments there is SCRTs and NCRTs and all of these expert bodies who feel that they know everything and they don't need any help from anyone.
Questionable, another debate.
Yeah, that's another debate. But and genuinely they know a lot. So I'm not even saying this in a negative way. But in the WCD departments, they feel that look, we can benefit from somebody coming, right? So right time, 2020 and post, and then right organization, this department, because this bureaucrat said, I have no support in my department, I don't know what to do, can I get help, right? So those things are covered, right? And then you say that we'll help you cater to policy, we'll help you monitor your team better, we'll help you improve better. In COVID, the incentive was कि आंगनवाड़ियाँ बंद हैं, there's no way you can do anything, तो क्या करें? So we will give you a technology solution to reach the parents. So again, so that graph got covered. Then if you look at the parent side of it, parents actually do care a lot about education. वो भेजते भी हैं बच्चों को स्कूल, आंगनवाड़ी, enrollment is very, very high. But एक तो वो सोचते हैं कि if you're sending children to school तो अब स्कूल का काम है पढ़ाना, which higher income parents don't think. हायर इनकम पेरेंट्स तो बच्चा घर आएगा तो उसका होमवर्क भी देखेंगे और अलग से भी कराएंगे और 4 एक्स्ट्रा क्लासेस में भी डालेंगे. आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि 4 एक्स्ट्रा क्लासेस में डालना अच्छी बात है, बट दे विल फील दैट दे स्टिल हैव द रिस्पांसिबिलिटी. Low income parents don't have that social environment around them to feel that way. So that is one. Second, they don't have the confidence. जैसे कि हम ही खुद 8वीं तक पढ़े हुए हैं, हम क्या बच्चे को पढ़ाएंगे, right? And that's where actually the model has to fit. The stakeholder has to fit the content, has to fit the model. For 3 to 6 year old children, आपको करना क्या है? There are different pulses in 3 different pulses at home. घर पे ही उन 3 pulses को एक bowl में mix करो और बच्चे को बोलो split it out into 3 different bowls. It's teaching children pattern recognition and sorting. That is going to teach them later how to spot good startups and bad startups as a VC. So that's the building block. Any parent can do this. But आपको क्या करना चाहिए? अगर आपको उनको बहुत बड़ी किताब दे दोगे कि ये किताब पढ़ के करो, even if you're telling them to do this simple thing, they will not even read it. It's like reading. For me, my third language is French. बहुत slowly पढ़ता हूँ मैं French. मतलब I don't read those books. So that's hard. So अगर आप 2 मिनट का वीडियो दे दोगे and say कि ये चीज आपके घर पे है, आप ये कराओ, तो they will do it, right? So then you have to build this whole sort of theory around them कि what do they lack, right? And get them to do that. Now the final bit of it, actually we started during COVID में we started working with parents. We also framed ourselves as the government school system. Nobody knows rocket learning. They know the government program. That is very critical because अब मैं जा रहा हूँ आपको बोल रहा हूँ कि पढ़ाई करो, कह रहा मेरे पास 4 चीजें ऑलरेडी हैं, प्लस बच्चा स्कूल भी जा रहा है. Who are you to tell me, right? But if I'm saying कि स्कूल ने होमवर्क भेजा है आपको कराना है, that is very intuitively understandable. Now what happened after COVID happened actually changed my mind. So one thing that I've changed my mind around is this anganwadi cadre. That's the third layer I'm talking about, जिसका incentives की बात कर रहे हैं. मुझे लगता था कि टीचर्स के माइंडसेट चेंज करना बहुत मुश्किल काम है. Government officials cannot be hired or fired. They are hired, they're never fired. Right? Financial incentives होते नहीं है. तो I am not running my own private sector workforce जिसको मैं बोनस दे दूंगा, जिनको मैं हटा दूंगा. Lot of people, lot of officers do dant the part and they come and say कि तूने ये कर दिया, तूने वो कर दिया, बहुत गालियाँ देते हैं, ये suspend कर देंगे 2 दिन के लिए वो. The system never moves. System stays, will move a little bit, it will come back down. Correct. Because fundamentally that officer की shelf life is 6 months or a year. Those teachers are there forever.
And this is a systemic problem right now.
This is systemic problem. This is structural governance problem, which nobody is able to solve or wants to solve.
Correct.
मतलब यूनियंस हैं, कौन सा पॉलिटिशियन करने वाला है कि मैं बहुत सारे टीचर्स को.
Scale is very high and it's been continuing for years.
It's been continuing and the political downside is very very high of taking action against a mobilized cadre of a lot of voters. Right? तो वो तो होने, and not just teachers, मतलब I'm just maligning poor teachers. Any cadre of government officials में ये same चीज है. And it was set up in that way for a reason and those many good reasons also, but that's the setup there. Also, teachers actually, primary school teachers are the highest status people in their communities. Okay, so they consider themselves higher status. Everybody else also considers themselves higher status. Right? So respect की बात है नहीं, respect तो मुझे मिल ही रहा है. फिर मैंने B.Ed भी किया है. कौन आए जो बाहर आके मुझे बता रहा है, मैं तो B.Ed भी किया, मुझे 20 years का experience भी है. So the persona of a teacher, primary school teacher is very very hard to change. If you are motivated, you are doing a good job already. Of course, training will help you to some extent. I'm not saying it won't. Improving curriculum will help you to some extent, but fundamentally you are not able to change there, and the intrinsic motivation does exist, but very hard to build on. Now the anganwadi worker is a different persona, but for a long time I clubbed the anganwadi worker saying कि मतलब ये टीचर ही है. तो मैं पेरेंट पे करता हूँ, पेरेंट का तो जनरली लाइफ चेंज होगी, टीचर की लाइफ नहीं चेंज होती अगर बच्चा बेटर करता है. सो आई विल गो फॉर द पर्सन जिसकी लाइफ चेंज होगी, विच इज द पेरेंट. नाउ व्हाट आई सॉ, कोविड खत्म हो रहा था एंड वी सॉ कि सम ऑफ द पेरेंट्स स्टॉप्ड रिस्पॉन्डिंग एंड वी कॉल्ड देम एंड सेड कि आप क्यों रिस्पॉन्ड क्यों नहीं कर रहे, अब आप क्यों नहीं अपना होमवर्क करके भेजते. राइट, हमारे व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स हैं, उस पर पेरेंट्स हैं, पेरेंट्स एक्टिविटी करते हैं, फोटो वीडियो लेके ग्रुप पे भेजते हैं. उसके बेसिस पे हम वो डेटा माइन करके उनको हम वापस मेडल सर्टिफिकेट भेजते हैं. दैट इज द मॉडल इन अ नटशेल. टीचर इस ग्रुप पे होती है, टीचर द आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर एक्चुअली मेक्स दीज ग्रुप्स एंड एड्स द पेरेंट्स एंड बीच बीच में वो तारीफ भी करते हैं, जैसे बहुत अच्छा किया या ऐसे कर लो. सो दे आर देयर. नाउ वी सॉ दैट पेरेंट्स हैड स्टॉप्ड. वी आस्क्ड मेनी ऑफ देम क्या हुआ. हाफ ऑफ देम सेड कि बच्चा तो क्लास में ऑलरेडी करके आ रहा है. देन वी सॉ कि बॉस दिस आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर को बोला भी नहीं है हमने कुछ करने के लिए, बट ये जो कंटेंट है जो पेरेंट्स के लिए है, जो घर के मटेरियल यूज करके है, जो इंडिविजुअल बच्चों के लिए, वो क्लासरूम में करा रही है ग्रुप्स के साथ, बिकॉज शी फील्स द नीड फॉर समथिंग लाइक दिस. शी फील्स द नीड कि मेरे क्लासरूम थोड़ा और जॉयस बन जाए, I should be able to do new things. I should be able to learn new things. So that was a big aha moment for us. Keep an eye out for organic behavior, and when you see organic behavior, just jump on that behavior. And then we said that this persona is the persona that will really sort of be interested. And then we made groups of anganwadi workers held by their supervisor. We sent them content ke classroom mein, ab ye padhao aur aise aise karo. Because they said कि हमें तो खिचड़ी lady बोला जा रहा है, दलिया खाने बनाने वाली बोल रहा है, मुझे teacher बोलेंगे तो that is really high status for me. They were printing out digital medals and putting them on their boards in their classroom. मतलब कौन करता है यार कि मतलब digital medal को इतना इज्जत मिलना is rare, and so they were really enjoying it in that way. They were saying कि मेरा day to day काम easy हो रहा है because I know I'm not a B.Ed and all that. Every day मेरे cognitive load होता है कि मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ. That's why I just default to the same 5-6 things every day. There's a new thing, the kids like it, I like it, I feel more worthy, my self-esteem increases. So technology we started using to augment their capacity, but building on a layer of people whose intrinsic motivation was there. So I think anyway, so that's the operational challenge, right? How do you figure out the playbook for it? Then the other aspects of the operational challenge are, of course, how do you reach so many people? And I can, of course, address that, but I'll pause. I've been talking for a long time.
No, this is very helpful. I think from what I grasped, and if I were to summarize, there is one key stakeholder, which is the government. And there was a clear macro tailwind that you captured. You worked with them. You didn't come in their way. You were very clear in saying that we will amplify them as opposed to champion ourselves. Like one of the things I wanted to ask you was, why do you not have rocket learning programs and why do you go with the government? But I think the answer really captured that well. So you captured a macro trend, you work with the stakeholder to please them and work with them to scale, otherwise it becomes really difficult. Then with the parent, you understand their motivation, you figure out what's the best way to champion them and you target that nail very well. And the anganwadi worker, I think the insight there is you look out for some of these behavior challenges, like what we call customer insights, right? You don't wait for them to tell you, but if it's so evident, you ensure that you can empower them. And these are the three key stakeholders that I'm at least hearing, and that's how I would summarize.
Absolutely. And if you see some behavior that you're not trying to generate and it's getting generated, just jump on that train.
Yeah.
Within 2 years, we have gone from not impacting any anganwadi worker because we were not looking at them as an area, and also schools and all were shut. Anganwadis were shut, to working with 15% of India's anganwadi workers because this trend was there. Right. So that was the thing. The other thing on the system, by the way, at least from an impact perspective, but I think it's generalizable to most industries, is that the additional effort we asked them to make was very little. So we were saying कि ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको पूरा अपना curriculum बदलना है, सब लोगों को महीनों train करो, change your data system fully and train everybody on a new data system. We were saying कि एक WhatsApp numbers of your staff चाहिए, टीचर एक ग्रुप बना दे और बॉट को ऐड कर दे, 1-on-1 पे भी मतलब आप नंबर का परमिशन दे दो. That is all you have to do. एक YouTube live training करा दो. After COVID we said कि YouTube live training enough नहीं है क्योंकि people are busy and YouTube live पे नहीं आते अब offline training एक करा दो, right? 1 घंटे की करानी है, ग्रुप बनाना है. That's it. अब और कुछ नहीं करना. बाकी डेटा सिस्टम से जनरेट हो रहा है, उसके बेसिस पे आपको भी हम रिपोर्ट दे रहे हैं, उसके बेसिस पे हम इंसेंटिव एंड रिकॉग्निशन आपके स्टेक होल्डर्स एंड स्टाफ को भी दे रहे हैं. So most interventions really put a very, very high burden, especially in the impact space they do. Because this whole thing about कि हमें सबके behavior बदलने हैं, उनको आता नहीं है, वो क्या कर रहे हैं, उनको मतलब उनको मेहनत करनी चाहिए and all that stuff happens. So I think really placing a low barrier of entry, it's a no-brainer for a system administrator. Because he's saying कि मुझे बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ करना ही नहीं है, and I'll see this sort of change happening.
Yeah. No, that's very important. Low barrier for entry. And also I see this mindset for scale from day zero, which is to say that we don't want to do concentrated stuff. We want to empower the entire system. So we have to figure out what works best for them. I want to understand the other piece. So the most important stakeholder being the child. If you can help us gain more empathy for them, right? Because again, I'm assuming, and I'm going to stereotype here, that most of us watching or us come from, privileged backgrounds, education is sorted, access to teachers is sorted, tutoring is sorted, we have great preschools, daycare, blah, blah, blah. That is not the case with the audience set that you are serving, right? So I want to understand that, if I were watching and understanding your model, how do I gain best empathy for the problems that exist with this, poor income childhood child? What do they suffer? And then, how do you, let's say, empower them? That'll be really helpful, Azeez. And any anecdotes will help, any, impact stories will help, because that will further put us into context.
Yeah. So I think, Yeah, I mean, if I was to look at a typical kid, right, like say, I did a field visit a couple of weeks ago, and there was this 5-year-old girl, called Ramya. So she was, classic Ghaziabad ke rural parts mein, 5-year-old child. Uh, I think, the typical sort of thing that she was doing was, not that she was facing was that she was 5-year-old, but already she was at the back of the class and struggling. So basically, there was some standard set of things that had to be taught in a classroom. Say an anganwadi worker was teaching those set of things. There were 2 or 3 kids in the front who were speaking up quite a lot. I also went, and they said, "हाँ बच्चे तुम्हारे बहुत अच्छे हैं," and then they said, "ये मतलब आप करो और आप करो," and they used to come and tell rhymes. And ये लड़की थोड़ा पीछे ही बैठी हुई है and शुरू से ही डरी है, right? And I can just trace her. She's afraid to talk to me at all, right? Maybe I'm new, but a couple of the kids were quite open to talking to me even though I was new. So what her future is going to look like is that she probably doesn't know even basics of alphabet and numbers even now. वो क्लास 1 में जाएगी, इट विल बी प्रेडिकेटेड ऑन हर नोइंग के अल्फाबेट पढ़ना तो आना चाहिए, अगर कोई स्टोरी सुना रहा हूँ तो आप उसके बारे में कुछ क्वेश्चन आंसर कर पाओ, नंबर्स पढ़ना हो. सो इट विल स्टार्ट विद दैट बेस. शी इज नॉट एट दैट बेस. They will start teaching things above that level, say addition of 1-digit number, or recognition of 2-digit numbers. So this kid is just going to keep falling. It will be like a foreign language to her. So imagine sitting in a classroom for 6 hours a day, जहाँ आपके लिए foreign language ही पढ़ाई जा रही है, right? And probably the teaching is to the top of the class. Teaching is to कि ये curriculum है, 20% of बच्चे उस curriculum को handle कर पा रहे हैं, बाकी सब पीछे बैठ के सोच जा रहे हैं. And eventually, end of the day, I feel that many of us didn't use our academic training too much, but we never lost our confidence and motivation, right? So children are emerging from India's school system, not just academically behind, but also feeling that they're worthless, right? And the whole generation of kids is being trained कि आपको कुछ नहीं आता है, आप worthless हो, and that is a huge, huge challenge, because I think most jobs in India don't need you to be amazing at academics. Very honestly, you can be quite plucky, you can be entrepreneurial, you can start your own business, you can start थोड़ा बहुत basics आना चाहिए, math का थोड़ा बहुत मतलब पढ़ना basic आना चाहिए. ये सब चीज़ें तो remedially भी आप सिखा सकते हो eventually, मतलब and all of that. But the confidence कि आप आपको कुछ आता नहीं है and आप कुछ आगे succeed नहीं कर सकते because of this, that people find hard to get by, right? So this Ramya is going to be on that track all her life. Yeah. And so I think that is where the sort of impact where we see, right, is a little bit कि if a parent says to us, a mom says कि आज बच्ची घर आई और उसने बताया कि उसको एक नई टाइप की राइम कराई या इस गेम में अच्छी थी, because there were different games. Now this child has found fun in a particular game, so she has succeeded in one type of game and she has come and told us. The best thing is if a mom says कि my relationship with my child has become stronger because I'm doing some activities with her. मुझे बात नहीं करना आता था बच्चे से. Interesting. So I have a 5-month-old daughter at home now. ठीक है. So my wife and I talk to her all the time. We are busy babbling away to her. All the books that we have read say कि treat them as humans. वो कुछ भी बोलते हैं, you respond back to them. There's a technique called serve and return. If the child does something, वो कुछ पकड़ के गिरा रहा है, तो you behave as if it is deliberate and you return it, and you do some response based on that. Then you let them do something. You play tennis with them, though you have no clue what they're doing. Now this is something we know, and we do this all the time. I have a nanny. I'm privileged. I have a nanny. My first nanny was a 50-year-old from Rajasthan. Every time I was talk to my child, she would laugh and said कि भैया आप क्या कर रहे हो? इसको कुछ समझ थोड़ना आ रहा है, आप इससे बात क्यों कर रहे हो? That was crazy, and that gave real context to this amazing stat. कि rich families, rich houses में, by the age of 3, children have heard 3 million more words than in poor households. So that the vocabulary gap, the comprehension gap has come by the age of 3. Actually, people put recorders in a house and said कि कितने शब्द हैं, उससे extrapolate किया. Oh, wow. Right, and I could see this firsthand because my nanny, who is an expert in baby care, right, that's her job. She does everything with the baby but talk to the baby. Right, so I think anyway, I'm sort of trying to weave together a couple of different points here, but fundamentally, these parents are able to sit with their Ramyas and are told कि अब ये simple activity करो, बच्चा वो activity कर रहा है. It's giving them some way of connecting with their child beyond what they were able to do, right? And उसी process में मतलब बच्चे सीख रहे हैं, बच्चा confidence develop हो रहा है.
Yeah, no, that's truly commendable, because I think the confidence part, at least, right? But we take this for granted that, a child growing up or as an adult will have confidence, but if it's being shattered because of the system since day zero, it's very difficult to bring it back. And yeah, I mean, just these structural things around talking to children and how their mind develops is extremely fascinating to hear. Thanks for sharing. Maybe it's also worth now understanding the pedagogy itself, right? Like a lot of what you mentioned and the terminology is very specifically behavior change, right? It seems like one of those scientific challenges, which is not just a mechanical way of delivery. You have to innovate on form of delivery, a kind of content, think through what the structural nuances of it should be. How deeply, how deep was the effort to say that, okay, we'll be really systematic about this, while also, I'm guessing delivery cannot be too advanced to say that it's not getting communicated in a way that is too advanced for, let's say, poor income localities, right? Yeah. So how do you manage these two dichotomies? What was the thinking? I also, like, one of the facts that you folks often mention is from the age of 3 to 6, 85% of the brain gets developed, right? So maybe if you can join all those dots and talk to us about the delivery aspect of it itself, that'll be really fascinating to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think at a young age, actually, it's an interesting construct because you cannot have just games that kids do and get better. Right? All the research shows that for the youngest kid, and actually this extends even to older kids, honestly. Sure. If we look back at our own education and did we like going to labs and trying things out for ourselves, right? We definitely learned from that. But for the youngest kids by the age of 6, 7, there's actually not that much concept. There's a lot of practice. Right? Ab chota hai ya bada hai. उसमें आप क्या कॉन्सेप्ट सिखाओगे मतलब it's sort of explaining, getting people to put an order, understanding what it means and so on, right? So it's really activity based, it's really play based, and actually all the theory agrees on this, right? Government systems curriculum is not bad, they are activity based and fun based only. In fact, private systems often do a lot of rote memorization, ABCD, 1, 2, 3, 4. Parents care about that. One of the sad things is that you go to any rural household and you ask a parent and say कि आपका बच्चा क्या जानता है? She will say कि सोनू 1 to 30 बताओ, and बच्चा 1 to 30 and 30 तक बोल देगा. But then you say कि अच्छा ये कितनी उंगलियां हैं? वो 3 नहीं बता पाएगा. So there's a big difference between sort of memorization and understanding, and how do you know what 3 is, and how do you know कि 1 हटा दोगे तो 2 आएगा. क ख ग पता है, लेकिन कौवे का first alphabet क्या है? ये नहीं पता है. So those are the things that we actually do a lot of testing on ground and try to understand where are people sort of tripping up, where are they sort of finding it hard, right? But the overall philosophy ki in real life activity karna hai. अब digital method है but IRL होना चाहिए. It is not supposed to be कि वो बच्चा video देख रहा है और सब सीख रहा है. Right? So simple activities, we send demos to parents or teachers saying कि ये दालें mix करो और इसमें अलग-अलग group में डालो. Parent and बच्चा will watch it together. And then the parent will give the task, the kid will do it, the parent will encourage them, then photo video will be taken. It will be local language, it will be vernacular, it will be using materials that are available in the household. Those are very key design principles. That we had from the beginning, right? So now we have come up with a set of toys that will approximate these Curious Cup toys या जो भी toy sets जो rich households में होता है. Because you're saying कि बर्तनों के साथ और कपड़ों के साथ you can do it. Now the other thing, what was counterintuitive to us, couple things. One is, for example, Sesame Street US में has been making 30-40 minute videos. आज के पेरेंट या टीचर या बच्चे को 30-40 मिनट होगे तो चांस ही नहीं है. In fact, this podcast is amazing that viewers are listening to 60 minutes, which is fantastic. But what we did was we started YouTube Shorts. We said कि entertainment के लिए if our audience is looking at YouTube Shorts, so वो education के लिए वो 10 मिनट करें और यहाँ. So there was a big tussle. Our content team has a lot of educationists who are fantastic, and they are saying कि लोग नहीं पढ़ाया जा सकता 5 मिनट से कम में. And हम कह रहे हैं कि नहीं 1 minute से कम में करो. And finally हम 2 minute के happy medium से में आ गए, and we saw that people are watching. We also A/B tested a lot of formats. The value of a tech model is that as opposed to a feet on street model, is कि आपका person जा रहा है और दिखा रहा है, आप कितना data collect करोगे. अभी हम 1 million parents हमारे system में हैं, मैं 30,000 को 5 minute दे दूंगा और 20,000 को 2 minutes, I can do it. So that was one major thing, format wise, how do you attract attention, how do you use some sort of jingles, how do you use your some sort of bore breakers. 30 seconds के बाद लोग बोर हो जाते हैं, कुछ ऑडियो डाल दो बीच में. So we developed a lot of content of that sort. Again, that was something that had never been done in the education context.
Yeah.
Entertainers used to do it.
Correct.
And they do it. So that's something we picked up. The other thing that we picked up that was counterintuitive was कि you have to figure out who the core audience is and how they're actually using a product. तो जैसे ऐसा हो रहा था, हमने कहा पेरेंट के लिए प्रोडक्ट है तो मुझे को बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है. आई डोंट हैव टू मेक इट टू कलरफुल, इट हैज टू बी क्लियर एंड इजी टू अंडरस्टैंड. तो इफ इट्स अ डेमो ऑफ समबडी डूइंग इट तो उनको समझ तो आ रहा है इसके थ्रू, राइट. एंड इनफैक्ट वी टेल देम लर्निंग आउटकम एंड अच्छी भाषा में बताएं वो. सो यू नो वी यूज्ड टू डू दैट. देन वी सॉ कि इवेंचुअली ना बच्चा भी देखता है, पेरेंट हमेशा कभी भी अकेले नहीं कर रहा है, वो बच्चे को दिखाता है 2 मिनट वीडियो. एंड इफ द चाइल्ड इज गेटिंग बोर्ड एंड सेइंग नो मुझे नहीं करना है, तो देन पेरेंट भी नहीं करेगा. नो मैटर हाउ मच द पेरेंट केयर्स, इवेंचुअली पेरेंट थक जाएगा यार कि ठीक है नहीं करना तो ना करो. सो देन वी स्टार्ट मेकिंग पुटिंग सम एनिमेशन, मेकिंग इट मोर कलरफुल, making it more fun. We increase the fun quotient of the activities also. So that all also we had to do. The big advantage. So you know, so we actually overturned our whole content bank and said कि इससे तो नहीं हो पा रहा है. You know, kids are not liking it. Kids have to now like it. So you have to figure out who the ancillary sort of main user is or ancillary user is, how they're interacting. So in the early days of a product, I think that observance is very important. Then I think the other thing that we saw from a reward and recognition perspective also was कि what is going to work. So one of the things that we started doing is कि we started seeing एक teacher chocolate भेजती थी बच्चों को. अगर उन्होंने आज के दिन एक्टिविटी करके भेजी है तो उनको 1 चॉकलेट मिलता है, अगर 2 दिन से भेज रहे हैं 2 चॉकलेट मिलता है.
Incentivization.
हाँ, मतलब चॉकलेट ही डिजिटल इमोजी चॉकलेट है, नॉट रियल चॉकलेट, इमोजी चॉकलेट. बट डेली वो द किड यूज्ड टू आस्क द पेरेंट कि मेरे कितने चॉकलेट है. You know, and in fact, एक पेरेंट को तो ये भी कर लिया था, उस पेरेंट ने 1:5 रेशियो लगा लिया था कि if you got 5 chocolate, I will give you 1 real chocolate.
Nice.
1 real chocolate देना is not scalable for us, but हमने उसका एक फीचर बना दिया कि अब आपको चॉकलेट, the bot is giving chocolates. And actually people didn't realize कि ये bot है. People thought कि it is some sort of teacher only. For all intents and purposes, it is a teacher. So some teacher is giving me some chocolate. So I think that was the third sort of bit on it कि you know, we observed user behavior and what the best of our users were doing, right, and tried to recreate those conditions and functionality for the rest of the users as well.
Yeah, I love that. Especially the last point is very applicable for any product building journey, right? Like you observe what your power users are doing and you scale that because that's what the delight moments are. And this helps with a lot of, I think, clarity on the model itself. Very, very helpful. Thank you so much, Azeez, for helping us with this. I was curious to know as you were talking, right? Like the thing I was thinking about is many of these feel like first time challenges that the team must have gone through, right?
Yeah.
Like think talking to the government, think like developing a program which has not been developed before, think talking to and developing empathy for anganwadi workers. How do you sort of manage that as an entrepreneur, right? Like as a completely intellectual challenge when you're doing so many things first time as a founder, and that remains to be, I think this is a question I ask sometimes to other founders as well, but you're since doing so many first time things, do you by now have a mental model to say that okay, this is how I will learn or like understand this bit very fast? And what were these like more unique experiences from your POV? Like, I mean, I'd love to know some of that because it feels like challenges which you've not encountered before, right?
Yeah, for sure. And absolutely. I think some of them I had done my previous sort of social impact work in Pratham. But that said, running something as a founder versus running something as a manager is very, very different. Right? Sure. So, बहुत अलग हो जाता है. And early education space, nobody had really done this sort of work. The other thing was that so many other challenges, that so many of these things you have to do in parallel. अब साथ में अपने पेरेंट मॉडल को भी थोड़ा बेटर कर रहे हो, बट साथ में यू हैव सीन दिस न्यू स्ट्रीम ऑफ आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर इज आल्सो रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू व्हाट यू आर डूइंग. And so on and so forth, right? So you then are selling multiple products also. आप एक product को stable करो, नया आ रहा है, फिर तीसरा sell करो either to governments or others. So those things sort of you have to figure out as you go. I think one of the things that one of my mental models is कि sort of can't be afraid of sort of messing something up or failing, and that's what we tried to put in the team all. And this is a well-known sort of thing, but it's hard to do in practice.
Sure.
But fundamentally, you have to say, okay, look, let's try it, let's be aggressive, let's go for it. And अगर नहीं होता है तो नहीं होता है.
Sure.
Right? So, but if it happens, it is really going to be a game changer. Yeah. Right? So I think that sort of thing.
Can you share some counterintuitive moves that you made, like something you thought you'll do, you'll fly with, didn't work, or like just to put it into context?
Yeah. So I think. One of the counterintuitive things that we did early on is that we got the opportunity to do a randomized control trial. Randomized control trial is sort of the gold standard of social impact evaluation. Okay. Basically, it's derived from the concept of medicine testing. आप एक प्लेसिबो देते हो और एक रियल मेडिसिन देते हो यूजर्स को, एंड फिर if the results are the same, that means कि आपका medicine is not effective, right? But if the results are better, then it means yeah. Now this is a very tricky thing to do, and a lot of very established organizations and government policies in India and globally have failed the test of RCTs because they are good common sense solutions that have been done, scaled, but they don't work. Now for us, 6 months into founding, we were given this opportunity कि आप by JPAL, some of JPAL's senior most people, and MIT JPAL is the gold standard of impact evaluation. So they said 1 year into our founding कि we are ready to do a evaluation, we'll do it for free. Normally these evaluations cost about $1 million. So they said we'll do it for free, which was about 5 times the budget. So they said हम free में कर लेंगे, लेकिन अभी करना है हमें, अभी हमारे पास funds वगैरह हैं, we can do it now. And for us it was a very interesting thing because we said कि अगर अच्छा चल गया तो this will take us a long way, but अगर नहीं चला तो fledgling organization ही
for 6 months
बचेंगे नहीं बचेंगे पता नहीं क्या होगा, right? And 6 months का मॉडल है,
correct.
मतलब we are still figuring it all out यार, मतलब
you don't know if it's impactful or not yourself.
शुरू में we were not even connected via the WhatsApp API, हम manually भेज रहे हैं WhatsApp लोगों को, so you're at that early stage. And so there was a lot of thinking that we had to do, okay, should we go for this, right? And then eventually we said, okay, let's go for it, but we'll mitigate risk by involving this set of metrics so that some metric or the other should work. We will reduce our own strain and effort by not putting additional resources. We'll continue with the same resources we have, and eventually we want to learn what to do, what not to do. So let's expose ourselves to the risk. But I think that was one major case, and as it turned out, because of COVID, we couldn't do it then. So then we had to do it later, and finally we did many years. Like it took long time to do, and finally the results were very good, which are propelling us to the next level of sort of really taking us to the big leagues. But that sort of thing was one thing that has probably given me the most stress over the last 3-4 years. But the call had to be taken at that point, and I think that's the difference between sort of entrepreneurs who are trying to do something major, that they will do it, versus others who are trying to really hedge for risk. Right? So I think that was one. The other thing that we always sort of tried to do was, I think always had this belief that you have to pilot at scale, and because I think piloting at small scale is just fooling yourself. And this is something I learned from my old boss Madhu Chauhan at Pratham. But fundamentally, anything will succeed at small scale. मतलब उसमें कुछ मुश्किल नहीं है, all your energies, all your talents, all your passion is going
false
into
positive.
बहुत ज़्यादा false positive होता है, and you cannot afford in your life to spend your life scaling up your false positives. So I think that was the other thing कि अगर करना है तो उसको scale पे करना है, right? So our first launch was with 50,000 children, and people said कि तुम पागल हो गए हो, कि why are you launching with 50,000 children? And our second set of things was in a state that was pretty poor. We did 5 districts. That was one example that didn't really work out. मतलब we really struggled very badly with doing that. Post-COVID, we doubled down on expanding on our parent model. Post-COVID, parents had stepped back and said कि हमें नहीं करना है. ये teachers पे आ रहे थे. So we were sort of struggling with our parent model and at the same time starting a teacher model. And we were saying कि चलो, let's do both together, and we have to sort of sell it to our backers, but we will do it, right? So all those things have sort of been there. We thought about doing a national survey with the government, and then we decided to not do it. We'd raise money for it. We had all the thing. We'd hired people for it. Then we said government will shut us down if we give a national survey with bad results. So let's not do it. We'll let the government do their own survey. Nice. So I think there have been all these things where we really wanted to do stuff, not done some, done others. But I think being audacious is the number one requirement for an entrepreneur, especially a social impact one, because incremental changes will not stick. So unless you totally change the game, आप जाओगे 2 साल के बाद वो कुछ अलग दिखेगा ही नहीं, मतलब nothing will have changed.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's also a very, very key pointer. I'm loving how, outside in, I would have felt that this conversation will lead to specific learning. So let's say only social entrepreneurship, but I think most of your learnings are applicable to build any large scale organization, irrespective of what nature of the business you're in. So I think that common theme I'm really appreciating. This has been really wonderful. I want to understand one last piece of the business, which is how do the economics work for a non-profit organization, right? There has to be some input, there has to be some output. If you can walk us through, of course, with ballpark numbers, the idea is just to understand the economics of a non-profit business. How do you sustain yourself as an organization? How do you pay salaries? And what the output is, if there is one, in terms of, fueling any economic incentive at the end. How does that work?
Yeah, so one of the things that we thought very deeply about in the beginning was whether to set up a for-profit or a not-for-profit.
Sure.
Right, and some of us had come from a for-profit background. I think mentally saying that we will do a non-profit was very hard. It's a hard thing to say that we will not, in a for-profit people know कि probably बहुत ही मुश्किल है कि मैं पैसा कमाऊंगा, but at least मेरे पास hope है.
Correct. There is, you have optionality in life.
At least, you have optionality. If it works out, I will make money.
Yeah.
Right. And even with your friends and all, you are saying कि मैं for-profit ही करूँ. अब मैं non-profit में जा रहा हूँ. People are saying, what the hell are you doing, man?
Correct.
Many people's families also say this, कि what are you doing here?
Yeah. And you must be 28, 29 at the time?
When we started Rocket Learning, I was just actually turning 30.
Yeah, okay.
At that point. So, fairly early on. So, but many of my co-founders, I mean, there is this sort of thing, right? So, हम सोच रहे थे कि for profit करें, not for profit करें, and eventually we realized कि look, we want to cater to the bottom 40%. Right? And there's nothing wrong with catering to the top 30% or the middle 30%. But हमने कहा हमें bottom 40% पे करना है. We know that we want to do this because that's where we feel we'll be most additional in our lives, right? So they can't pay easily. Education में they are not used to paying. इसलिए तो government system में भेज रहे हैं. They're not gone to the private system because it's very hard to pay. Government systems are not able to pay because procurement is hard. मतलब फिर and then sales cycle times are long. So government से भी पैसा नहीं आएगा. तो अगर मैं for profit करूँगा तो then I will be forever doing scope mission creep. कि मैं हमेशा ही कहूँगा चलो फिर मैं इस segment को करता हूँ cater जो मुझे कुछ पैसा तो दे पाएगा. Right, so I will artificially constrain myself in one direction.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel making money is really hard and making impact is really hard. तो एक कर लो यार अच्छी तरह से.
Sure.
So my philosophy on money is make money, sell it to the highest value customer who has the highest willingness to pay and do a really good job of it. But don't be in this half-assed middle thing जहाँ कुछ mid customer को पकड़ के सोच रहे हो थोड़ा सा पैसा भी करूँगा थोड़ा भी impact करूँगा. मतलब that is ना इधर के ना उधर के, right? So we said कि non-profit करते हैं, but we want to make a highly scalable, sustainable model. We cannot have a model where we are spending, lakhs of rupees per child or thousands of rupees per child. So model today is कि हमें 100 रुपए per child per year roughly लग रहा है, right? So fundamentally what we are saying is कि we are changing IQs of kids at the cost of 100 rupees per child per year. एक आधे कॉफी के खर्चे में हो रहा है.
Wow.
And our thought was कि there's enough wealth in the world that if we can show a lot of scale and a lot of impact, we will get that money.
Sure.
Right? So abhi मैं, my budget this year is about 50 crore. Right? I am catering to about 3 crore kids or so. 3 to 4 crore kids इस साल में कर रहा हूँ. So roughly 100 to 150 rupees पे हो रहा है. 50 crores is not hard to get if you can show impact. And over time, we are going to try to get governments to institutionalize that. Some of the costs can be borne directly by government. This, that, what, we are trying hard for something like that. But at the core of it, we said कि government के लिए भी all their children के लिए करने के लिए model, it may cost 200, 300 crores. Total amount of spending on education is 100,000 crores.
Yeah.
तो मैं जो leverage on government funding जो मैं दे रहा हूँ, right, for 0.2% or so of the
total
sum, right? So that is my metric. Okay, I cannot be more expensive than this. Sure. We actually started with 50 rupees per child per year. Okay. Then later we saw कि इससे effectiveness नहीं आ रहा है. तो but I think 100 rupees भी government afford कर सकती है, but 1000 नहीं करेगी. So we said 100 में क्या होगा? चलो then we said कि every district should have a person on ground. We have a coordinator in every district जो बैठ के डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफिशियल्स के साथ आंगनबाड़ी वर्कर्स के साथ मिलते हैं, मीट करते, पेरेंट्स को नहीं मिलते. दैट इज वन स्टेप टू फार, बट दे मीट द आंगनबाड़ी वर्कर्स एंड दे गेट द आंगनबाड़ी वर्कर्स टू मीट द पेरेंट्स. So that's how we optimize the cost efficiency and the effectiveness, and we said कि 100 rupees is our sweet spot. Our funding is largely through foundations, so people like the Gates Foundation, a lot of foundations in India, globally, high net worth individuals who want to contribute and give back, who are advising us. All of these people have been our large, majorly our funders, but effectively what has been attractive about us has been this sort of cost effectiveness proposition and the impact we are able to achieve through leveraging this massive government system. Beyond that, on the economics, so basically grant funded, a little bit of sort of government funding as well, but very little. But on a high leverage funding system where a lot of the money is actually being provided by government already to the model, though not to us. And scaling up. So did I answer the question? Is there something that I missed?
Yeah. So broadly, so input is via these grants that come majorly from the private organizations or high net worth individuals, a bit from the government.
Absolutely.
And the way to scale that money and make more like impact from that capital is to ensure that your leverage is high on that system, which is about 100 rupees a child. That's what I'm taking away.
That's absolutely correct. And I think I do want to say that I see so many people trying to do social enterprise stuff and they get caught in this trap of money versus impact. My sort of, I really want to tell folks that, and I do tell them that, just be very clear of what you want to do in life. There are sectors like microfinance and healthcare where people are used to paying. You can do good and make money. There are other sectors where you can't do good and, I mean, good is relative, but you can't at least work with the bottom 40% and make money. Just be clear-headed and don't waste 10 years of your life, not going at the speed that you want at because you have this aspiration of another side.
Yeah. No, I think that's very important. So foundationally understand which game you're playing. In your case, you're doing the impact at scale game, not the money game, which is where you are. If you want to play both, there are other options. If you want to play money game, there are other options, is my takeaway. Super. I think that's super interesting. I'm trying to think if we missed out on any aspect on the entire business model. I think largely we've covered a bunch of things. Maybe the only thing is, again, like one of the things that I really like, and this is purely from a qualitative feeling lens, if you can share any, we started off with this question, right? The transformation, right? So if you have like stories of parents coming back to you or children or like, anganwadi workers where lives have dramatically been transformed, because I think that again puts so much into context, right? I think that I'd love to hear, and then we can go to the conclusory aspects of where I have a couple of final questions on your thinking processes.
Yeah. So I think one anganwadi worker story that will always sort of stay in my mind, right, is of this lady called Seema Rani, who, was working in Rajasthan. And what we sort of saw, right, the lady in Jodhpur, and she was saying to me कि मैं 30 साल से इस सेंटर को चला रही हूँ. In fact, मेरे जो students हैं उनके parents को भी मैंने ही पढ़ाया. मतलब they used to come to my center. Now their kids are coming to my center. 30 साल में किसी ने मुझे आके नहीं पूछा कि आपको क्या करना है, आपका क्या aspiration है, हम आपकी कैसे मदद कर लें. And so that was crazy to me because then she was saying कि आप मुझे बता पा रहे हो कि मैं क्या कर सकती हूँ, मेरी life easy कर रहे हो, you're making it more fun for me, and you're making me feel that I have achieved a higher level than I was at for all this time, right? And last 5 years of my career, but even at 55, I am learning how to use WhatsApp, I'm learning how to annotate content, I am building my skill up, and my kids are saying कि wow आप तो इतना कुछ, right? So I think, we talk a lot about AI and all of that, and we're using now AI to help these teachers, but we use AI a lot to say कि हम replace कर लेंगे humans को. We use it a lot to say that we will use AI to monitor better. One of the classic uses of AI would be कि एक कैमरा डाल दो ऐसे सेंटर में और आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर कर रही है नहीं कर रही, कब छुट्टी पे होती है, क्या होती है, सब मॉनिटर करेंगे एंड उसको फिर डांट डपट होगी कि आप आए नहीं, आपने किया नहीं, एंड उसका कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा ऑनेस्टली. मतलब पता ही होता है सुपरवाइजर को कि वो आते नहीं आते क्या होता है, right? And you can use it to say that we will make things easier for you, we will make it more interesting for you, we will personalize it for you, and we will listen to you. Right? And so 200,000 Anganwadi workers are feeling listened to and helped, and that somebody is watching out for them and helping them get to a higher level, and they are repaying that trust and faith with actually working very hard. So I think that is amazing for me, and we're always in this thing where we feel that government में कोई काम नहीं करता है, या किसी भी चीज़ में 50% लोग काम करते नहीं करते, मतलब मेरी कंपनी प्राइवेट सेक्टर में भी नहीं करते हैं. So how do you do that? Parents के लिए where I see it, is I've seen parents who said कि मुझे लगता था कि बच्चा बिल्कुल मेरा डल है, बुद्धू है, स्मार्ट नहीं है, तो मैं उसको गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में डाला. मैंने अपने स्मार्ट वाले बच्चे को प्राइवेट में डाला कि वो बेटर करेगा, वो मेरे लिए आगे करेगा, इसको मैंने गवर्नमेंट आंगनवाड़ी में रखा है. बट ये तो ज़्यादा स्मार्ट लग रहा है मुझे, मतलब वो शार्प हो गया है बिल्कुल, उसकी ब्रेन पावर बढ़ गई है, तेज हो गया है. सो माई किड इज आई एम सीइंग दैट दिस किड कैन डू वेरी वेल, एंड वो मतलब प्राइवेट से भी बेटर कर रहा है. सो आई थिंक दैट इज अगेन ऑल्सो लाइक अ रियली पावरफुल वन. आई थिंक आई कम बैक, these sort of stories I think are interesting for me. One of the things that I didn't talk about on the mental models when I was choosing what to do in my life, and even when I'm looking at what I'm doing in the next few years, is this concept that I learned actually in the lens of impact investing. I did a course at HBS which was on impact investing taught by Professor Vikram Gandhi and Sean Cole, who are quite well known in this. And uske andar tha ki impact investors try to think of the additionality of their investments.
Okay.
Right?
So what does that mean?
So basically, you're an impact investor and there's a Sequoia, right? And there's a company. If Sequoia is coming in and funding that company, should the impact investor also come in and fund that company?
Sure.
Right? So the question is ki, matlab, chalo, the company may be quite impactful, but they are making their money, I mean, they are getting the funds that they need anyway.
Right.
From a peak 15, from Axel, from whatever. Right? So maybe as an impact investor, I should look for the company that has the potential to be impactful, but the peak 15s are not looking at them.
Sure.
And right, so then we should do that. So I think for me, I have actually adapted it into the additionality of my time. Is the world going to be better off because I am doing something, or would it anyway have happened without me, right? So, so I think that is the framing as well, right? If I'm in a McKinsey, if I'm in some other place, probably I might be very good and do a better job and so on and be a high performer, but somebody else could do pretty much similar job. World is not going to a different place.
It'll happen anyway.
It'll happen anyway.
With or without you.
And so the thing is, here I feel that at Rocket Learning, I am additional. If I was not there, then either Rocket Learning would not have been there, or it would not have been there in the way that it is.
Correct.
And because of that, some lives have changed. Sure. Now there may be a time 5 years later where I feel I'm not additional anymore at Rocket Learning. You know, sab kuch acha hai. Matlab, I am whatever. I'm not getting the new ideas or whatever idea, or somebody else is getting the great new ideas that I also get. That time I will say, yaar, bahut acha hai. I will go and do something else where I can create that additionality value, right? So I think that is a way that I will be using as a framework to continuously measure my life and reassess my life going forward, right? In terms of where I'm additional. Not that every point I will just say, abhi mujhe nahi lag raha kuch ho raha hai, let me go. I mean, you can't be daft about these things also, but I think over time there may be 4 or 5 year, different career journeys in a 50-year career, and at every step maybe you try to find like where am I the most additional.
I love that. I love that. Like, where can I add the most unique value to the world is a great question to ask, I think. And that's what I will take back. You probably should have started with this principle. I love it. It's great food for thought for anybody who's listening. But this is great. I think providing foundational learning to any human is the biggest service that you can do for them, because you uplift thinking, confidence, future opportunities get unlocked. So I can only imagine the gravitas of the impact you're making. It's just very heartwarming to hear. And as you were, sharing, like, if parents feel that their children are smarter, if anganwadi workers feel that they are being more empowered to do their work, which means that they will put in further great input to transform these lives, it's just great service to the world. So thanks for existing, all of you, building Rocket Learning. I now want to, go to the concludatory aspects. Before I get there, I usually hate, by the way, macro questions, but since you have the benefit of like micro insights being a part of, ground level education, if you had to take a, outside-in view or like a macro bet on this, these are the problems that exist in education, and in 5-10 years, these ought to be solved, right? Like, just foundationally, this makes sense, and this is a systemic problem that exists. I would love to hear that from you, because, okay, you exist in a silo, which is solving for, let's say, childhood primary education. I don't know how to frame it, so you'd be able to do that best. But if you had to say that these are ancillary things around me, that of course we are not solving, but I don't see a world where in 10 years this does not get solved. I would love to hear, or like, just how you think education's moving forward. Any insights beyond Rocket Learning, but because of Rocket Learning?
Got it. Makes sense. I hate to be pessimistic, but I think I don't see anything that are inexorably moving towards progress in education, especially for the underserved, which is where I work. It's not as if there is something that this will 100% happen or the other. I can tell you the things that I feel are very possible if we are, as a country, as a set of people, able to achieve it, right?
You can share the problems also. Like, even if like you think that progress is not happening, maybe it's a food for thought for somebody to figure out the solution to it.
Progress is not happening because people are not seeing the new
ground reality.
The ground reality.
Yeah.
People are still stuck and saying ki, I talk to additional chief secretaries, senior educationists all the time. They say कि आप क्या कर लोगे technology में? मैंने तो ये, I tell you, somebody in Delhi that we worked with, we told them हमने यूपी में पायलट किया है, यूपी में बहुत अच्छा चला है, देखो we expected कि फिर कहेंगे हाँ. They said आपने यूपी में किया है, आपने दिल्ली नहीं देखा, जहाँ मैं काम कर रही हूँ वो यूपी तो बहुत अच्छा है compared to Delhi. And he's saying, boss, I mean, come on. And a lot of people are saying, and people are thinking back to 20, 30 years ago, and they're still solving, the tools that they're using are the ones that they've been using always. Right? They're not seeing it today. Look, this is the digital penetration. Look, mothers are becoming more educated. I mean, this generation of mothers is the most educated generation there has been. The sort of technology that they have is the most. Children are digital natives. Yeah. These opportunities that are there, people are not ready to sort of see them and adapt to them, right? So if they did sort of start looking differently, I think a couple of things that would happen. One is teacher training in India as a concept is totally outdated. In fact, I would say training anybody is a concept that is totally outdated. You bring them for a 3-day session once a year and you give them lots of ghota. You say, and you give them a huge manual or set of materials and say कि अब आप जाके पूरे साल में ये करो. Never going to happen. If you go to a gym, if somebody said कि आपको gym membership दे दी है और ये exercise की list दे दी है, अब आप एक साल करो, नहीं करोगे. What would you do? You have to have a trainer जो आपको आके daily support कर रहा है, daily थोड़ा आपको modify कर रहा है, फिर आपका peer group है जो साथ में जा रहा है, जो आपको पूछ रहा है, buddy structures, all those exist. So now you can actually make teacher training new in this way, right? Where you say, okay, chalo, I'll do some in-person training, which we also do that, right? We train every quarter, every 4 months, हम in-person भी groups में train करते हैं. But every day we are sending 2 pieces of content that are helping you do something in the classroom, but are also helping you learn how to do your job better. So by the end of the year, we actually give them a educator certificate. We say as an anganwadi worker, you have become an educator certificate because आपने daily experientially bite-sized तरीके में ये 2 चीजें करके by the end of the year आपको ये सब आता है. And we see कि उनको genuinely आता है, even if we don't make them do ghota. And so the techniques that have been used in inculcating habits, those have to be used for teacher training and behavior change or facilitator training behavior change. And I'm not saying teacher is just the person in the school, it's also the person at home. And parents are the kids' first teachers. So I think that sort of, basically I feel education mein the problem is less curriculum and content today. It was at a point, but now it is less that, and more how do you get that transaction to happen on a daily basis. Education is not polio vaccination. It's not immunization. It's not something जो एक बारी पूरा drive कर लोगे तो इसके वजह से हो जाएगा.
Sure.
It is a long-term game, and for that you have to use the best practices of private sector behavior change, high-end behavior change, and make them cheap enough. So I think if we do it, we can, if we focus on it and realize where India is at, and we meet, individuals where they are and and build on what they know, we can get there. But I think jury is out whether we'll be able to achieve that.
Sure. No, that's super helpful again. I think very, very nuanced, and somebody who's working in the thick and thin of things can only share this. So thanks for that. I want to get to the last aspects of, the conversation. One of the things I want to start with there is just who are your role models or organizations that you look up to? Because when I was, thinking this through again, it felt like, okay, if you had to, name like 100 unicorns, I could do like 70 of them, right? But if I had to name like, 50 great social organizations, I probably wouldn't be able to. Like I can talk about like, Pratham you were at earlier, and a bunch of these other ones but I'd love to hear from you that whom do you look up to and what are aspirational figures that you have set as a benchmark at Rocket Learning for you as an organization to scale. It could be internationally as well. The idea is just awareness on this front.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, I'll mention 3. Sure. I'll mention all the 3 from India. Sure. One is SEVA, the Self-Employed Women's Association. Which my co-founder Namma actually was at for several years. It's I think a 50-year-old organization, and they really set up the concept of self-help groups in India in a big way. All right, so community structures of people coming together to take collective action, encourage each other, support each other. Sure. And they did that in a time which was really hard. I think what we have done is to draw a lot of inspiration for that and create these self-help groups on WhatsApp. क्योंकि these digital communities we're creating वो क्या है यार, वो self help group ही है. Fundamentally हमने क्या किया है, we have copied that concept and we have made it digital. They used to send one person once a month to meet these groups because इतना easy नहीं होता in person मिलना. हमने उसको digital करके once a day, many times a day कर दिया है, asynchronous कर दिया है. But fundamentally the concept of self help groups and that collective action, especially by women, can lead to a lot. That's what they've done, and they've done that over 50 years, right? And microfinance and other things they've done. So I think that's a very, very classic example of coming up with insights on communities and how action happens. And one thing we've done, by the way, which I haven't mentioned before, is actually try to, a lot of digital communities are toxic. We've really tried to say, okay, can you use the positive effects of digital communities? Sure. So really sort of how to do that, but we've taken inspiration from these guys. I think the other is, if I was going to talk about my own employer, Pratham, and the founders there, Madhav Chavan, Rukmini Banerjee, and others, I think definitely this concept of no constraint thinking has come from there. So the annual State of Education report, which for a long time has been the only authoritative sort of source of facts and figures in education. That was done apparently at a meeting where the planning commission said कि कुछ data नहीं है, and the founder said कि हम 3 महीने में national survey करके आपके पास ले आएंगे, लेकिन आपको फिर कुछ करना है उसका data. And they said अभी करना है, and survey कर दिया. Now वो perfect था, नहीं था at that point, कैसे था, क्या नहीं था. But to think audacious and to say कि boss, we can do it, and I think that's as organizations grow, they lose that audacity, and that's also a startup thing. Startup may you have that audacity, बाद में you have lot to lose. So I think one of the things that I really do try to keep sort of telling myself is that we never should be too big to fail, and we never should be like sort of become so non-ambitious कि the stakes of failing become very high for us. And I think that's all big companies have that at some point or the other. You grow from series whatever C to series C, and then you at series C you say कि वो चीज़ तो मैं नहीं कर सकता जो मैं कर रहा था. So that's the second. And the third, I would say कि I do think Azeez Dhawan and the set of organizations he set up, I think we've seen the pace of social innovation come up. Orgs used to take 30 to 50 years to make a sector-changing impact. Yeah. I think his set of organizations have done it in, say, a decade. And we are trying to do it in 5 to 7, right? So I think that is also interesting. Now I would encourage people who want to make social impact and who think the only way to do it is आप start करोगे 25 पे और impact होगा 65 पे. ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है. You have to find the right sector at the right time. And you have to really take ownership of a sector, and really India may be even for-profit sectors, right? The people who have made big money is people who have dominated a sector, right? And then bought in others. And in our case, we don't want to dominate for money's sake, but you really have to own and support a sector in a lot of depth. So I think that Azeez and a few other folks have been able to show that we can do it quickly, and that actually helped me also feel that I can start and instead of drudging away for 30 years, I can do it quickly.
Got it. No, that's super helpful, and the no constraint thinking point really stands out. And of course, we've had the pleasure of hosting Azeez. That was like a very high quality conversation, one of the highest on the show. So thanks for mentioning. I want to also understand from you what impact means in its truest form for you. I think it's loosely defined, and rightly so. It's contextual to many people. For me, the way I look at it is, even if this conversation helps like any number of people, that's some form of impact for me, because I feel a lot of gratification having contributed in a very perhaps insignificant but hopefully tiny manner to somebody's life via knowledge, right? That's my form of gratification. How do you derive your impact, and like what is the feeling you wake up with every day? This is very, I know, philosophical and sometimes does not get spoken of enough, but in its rawest form, what is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're really making me think deeply there, and probably something I should be thinking about more. I think I'll go back to additionality and the feeling that you're sort of changing the world in some sense, right? In my mind, that is impact. Now, as you said, you're changing the world by inspiring some set of people to do things in a different way. Somebody who may not have started up will see something and start up. Somebody who may have thought we cannot break into venture capital without a particular background will break into venture capital because they are empowered to do so. So I think actually for me, impact is creating that opportunity. So I think opportunity and empowerment are words that are very close to me and that have been a constant for me through my career. That I fundamentally believe that if you give people the chance to do things, they will take that chance and run with it. And I have that innate confidence and belief in people, which is why all my career has been that can you give people that sort of chance, right? And that impact actually is not just with the kids that I train, but maybe people in my team. Right? You take the chance, try for it. If it doesn't work, I will back you. That sort of thing. So I think that sort of percolates a lot in my style. That I will give you the chance and the opportunity, and I will trust that you have the interest and the passion to deliver on it.
Got it. Opportunity and empowerment. I really like that framing. The other thing I want to understand, and you've had the pleasure of going to really great institutions when it comes to either education or workplaces as well, and you've of course done incredibly well, which shows in your experience of the enterprise you're building now yourself. If you had to maybe talk through very quickly the role of each of these places, be it IT Delhi, McKinsey, or HBS, I'd love to understand in a quick manner how that or those experiences transformed your sort of journey, because like very few people have a combination of all. You've of course had the pleasure of, so would love to take any second order learnings from those.
Yeah, I think IIT Delhi made me a leader and made me feel that I could achieve anything. and not through academics at all, or not through cracking JEE at all. But I went to IIT determined to not be a good engineer, and I was never a good engineer. But I did a lot of different activities and got in a peer group of people who were pushing themselves to be the best that they could be. I used to shake in my legs used to shake when I used to speak, and I forced myself to speak for 50 days in succession before a group, 5 sort of impromptu speeches a day, till the point that I maybe even now I'm not there are many better public speakers than I am, but I've become pretty good at it. And then picking up these insane sort of extracurricular and other challenges and succeeding at failing in some but succeeding in others, making me feel that later I could do a lot, right? And being in a peer group of that sort of pushers. So I think that's I would not have been a founder or entrepreneur, I feel. Well, actually, I wouldn't say founder. I would not have been a CXO or a manager of that sort if I wasn't there, I feel. McKinsey, I think McKinsey was great. McKinsey sort of helped me understand what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do. So it helped me learn from some good people. But I think most fundamentally, it helped me try out a bunch of different domain roles and helped me understand that this is the functional role that I want to play in my life, which is that of an operator, as I mentioned before. And then third, I think HPS was very interesting. I went to it in a point in my life where I knew what I wanted to do in my career. In fact, I was returning to Pratham after HPS, so I was not going to found. I think HPS pushed me to be hungrier, more demanding of myself, and think that I could do more. So, I'm not sure why I didn't want to found earlier. I did think that where I could be would be very impact generating, and I still feel that. But I think HPS really made me feel ki, with the peer group, with the confidence that I further got, with some of the connections and all, I don't think just HBS specifically. I think it's being if you surround yourself in the society of a bunch of hungry people, ambitious people, and open yourself up to that and are honest to yourself, I think at some point you will try to make the best of whatever you can do. For some, it may be being a founder, some it may be changing your job and doing something that is wildly difficult or different or whatever. But it pulled me out of a comfort zone and made me think much more uncomfortably, and I have had a much more uncomfortable life because of that, but probably a more fulfilling one.
I love that. That is so perfectly summarized for each of those journeys. Thank you so much for sharing. This is an interesting one, but I also ask what would your friends say about you? Because to get the other side of the journey, would love to know your answer to it.
Yeah.
How would your friends describe you, basically?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say that I have a lot of clarity. And sometimes they don't know that, a lot of effort to get that clarity. But I think people would say that I have a lot of clarity in terms of what I want to do. And I've had that for a pretty long time, probably earlier than most people do. So I think that is one thing people would say.
And is this nurtured?
Sort of nurtured, but, it depends. I mean, I was very clear when I was 25 what I wanted to do. And at 28, I was very unclear. And 30, I was the most unclear. And 31, I was quite clear, and now I'm very clear. So basically.
But it's deliberate effort.
There's a lot of effort that you have to put into get clarity because you think you're all set and you're all clear. And then something will change. I don't think being blind is also the answer, right?
Sure.
You should not say, now I've decided this for the next 30 years, I will do this only. Right? So you have to drive that clarity out. But sometimes it's helpful if you have an overall sort of North Star that's guiding you. Then you can at least zigzag between the North Star. Otherwise it becomes difficult. So I think that's something that people have always sort of felt. And the other thing that they've said is generally that I'm fairly patient and get along with people, which I think has been a strength in sort of being able to develop a large network of people who sort of I get along with. Though after the birth of my daughter, I've been told I'm much less patient now because of less sleep. But I think overall that's the idea.
No, fair. Interesting. Clarity, patience, and people's person is what I'm going to take back. In an alternative world where rocket learning would not exist, what would you be spending your time on?
Very difficult, because when I moved on from my previous work and rocket learning was not there, that was the moment of crisis that I said, that I'm referring to, least clarity. I wasn't sure what I would do. So I think that was really difficult. Probably I would say that I think public intellectual in some way, like really becoming an expert in a particular topic and being basically I'm an ideas guy. So I think I would be, even my successes at Rocket, I think, have been focused on coming up with unique ideas that people have not thought of earlier and being able to articulate that and being able to sort of drive that into reality. So I think I would be an ideas person wherever I was. Let me leave it at that vague level.
Fair. Interesting. I first time heard, I think a lot of people claim they are idea people, but not with as much confidence. I really like that. This one is on, and I don't mean to be like stereotypical to say like what the challenges, etc. are, but like one thing that fascinated me about your journey is you're, of course, your career pathway is a very top of class person, right? And rightly so. But then you're also self-secure to have charted your own pathway, which is unique, right? But that comes with a certain sense of being self-secure, being able to take that sort of risk, right? And you were telling me, right? Like you have batchmates who have started Misho, Shadowfax, etc. So you see that. So there's of course a peer comparison. And then you see yourself, right? And yet you choose to be on your path. Talk to us about that mindset. I know I've referred to this briefly earlier as to why you started Rocket, but I'd love to still double click on, I think fundamentally the fact that you need to be self-secure, you need to carve out your own pathway, and then you need to succeed in what you want to do as opposed to just driving what everybody else is asking you to do. So I'd love your thought process on it.
That's the toughest thing about being a social entrepreneur. Honestly, it's the toughest thing. And it's a constant piece of sort of thinking through to make sure that, making sure you understand your priorities. So actually the time when sort of, again, at 25, I was most secure. I was doing something in Impact that I really liked. All my batchmates were still figuring out what to do.
Right.
At 28, 29, I was in B school, where at HBS, nobody cared about somebody who had come from India from a social impact background and wanted to go back to a background. It was the first time in my life that I am a Indian, male, Hindu, upper caste, reasonably well-off person. So I have been listened to in every room I've been in. And at HBS, I was a global south person from a social impact background, wanting to go back to social impact, so never going to make much money. Person and
none
so,
of this is aspirational.
None of this is aspirational. You don't want to make friends with this sort of person. I mean, you don't care. So, right people make friends with everyone,
of
right?
Course, but conventionally, we're describing this as a non-aspirational figure.
So that's what, right? So I mean, my wife has been my batchmate at HBS, and she's often had that experience, despite being immensely qualified, of not being treated with as much respect as, a guy of a similar background. And for the first time, I actually saw that. So anyway, that was happening at HBS. Then my friends were starting all these amazing companies, and they were those companies were going crazy. They were growing really, really rapidly. They were getting a lot of adulation, rightfully so. And I've considered myself the equal of anyone I've ever met. So for me, it was, look, boss, I've spent all this time on this particular thing. Do I really want it, or do I want to be on this other path that these other friends, the other peers are on? So I think it took a lot of introspection to understand, where sort of self-validation is coming in, where I'm needing external validation, and will I be okay with a career path where I will not have that level of external validation, that level of income, but I will achieve hopefully quite a bit, and I will be known by the right people for what I want to do, and I have that satisfaction of a job well done, etc. And for me, the answer right now is that, this is good. Who knows in 5-10 years what will happen?
Sure.
But I think that is a journey that everyone sort of has to be, especially people who are not going, because, and honestly, the richer you get, the better you do in a business background, there'll be somebody doing better. My wife has gone through, seed to Series A to Series B, running a big company called Apna Club. She sees other people doing well and she says, oh, I wish I was that person. I see other people doing well. So that thing will always exist. I think the question is sort of, can you have a North Star that you remind yourself of? Can you find enjoyment in your daily life? Can you sort of really form a view of yourself as a person and what would give you happiness? And sorry, I'm not giving any bullet point answer, but I think the main thing is that, look, this is going to be a struggle, and you have to sort of be patient with yourself as you go through it. You may decide to change because of it, but hopefully you can, stick to avoiding external validation as much as possible.
Yeah. Very interesting. No, I think thanks for being super candid in sharing this. I mean, a lot of great cues there, just in terms of identifying your own pathway. If it's going to be a struggle, I think odds of success just get more optimized in choosing where you want to succeed as opposed to like being impacted by external means, perhaps.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah. In fact, I didn't say that. You're saying that, but you're right. Because everything is going to be a struggle. So at least you may as well choose the parameters of what you want to succeed in.
Fair. Oh, super. I'm loving this. This has been lovely. For the last question, this is fairly stereotypical, but I encourage for the last question to maybe think back time. And for you, maybe one of the pivotal times could have been, let's say, graduating IIT Delhi, right? And if you could go back to that moment precisely and perhaps condense all of your learnings in hindsight to just give yourself that benefit of this is the pathway you can be on, what would that look like? And as an extension, maybe perhaps we can learn from those, it's been 2012, so we're talking 12 years back now. What would that look like? And maybe we'll learn from that, and that'd be a great ending point.
Yeah, I think really need to think of that letter back to the 22-year-old. But, I would say that I think be bold is one very strong thing that comes to mind, right? Like, be bold, seize the moment. I think whatever I've seen since then, whether what I've done or what I've seen others do, is be in the right place, right time. Give yourself the chance to be in the right place at the right time and jump at that opportunity. That is the difference between success and failure, especially as an entrepreneur. Because I've seen many founders, and I would not have guessed that they would be so successful. What is the difference? Difference is that the others were just waiting in the wings and could never jump. And the ones who succeeded actually jumped. Right? So I think be bold and take that jump, I think, is really critical. And today's world has opportunity, especially for people who are a little bit privileged. So if you have privilege, make the most of it. If you don't, this world is better than it used to be earlier, right? So I think that is probably the biggest single thing I would say. Other thing I would say is try to find calm and peace within yourself, not externally. This is very trite and, it seems a lot of gyan, but I've definitely seen enough now, having seen some success, seeing others who have success, that basically success does not give you happiness. Honestly, it doesn't, because your happiness is if you don't figure out your thinking, happiness is relative. And you will always find people doing better than you, and at every stage you will always want to be that person. And so you have to figure out what your happiness means and train yourself on that journey. And some people do it through meditation, some people do it through exercise and fitness, and there are other ways. I wouldn't say I've solved that fully. That is one part of the journey I'm still on, actually. But I think I've got closer to it than I did in 2012. Where everything was about really succeeding in career, being really successful, which I still value. But I don't think that is enough to give me happiness.
Got it. Awesome. I think both of these pointers are very, very helpful. Be bold and figure out your definition of success. Thank you. This has been such a pleasure, Azeez. I think I have certainly enjoyed a ton, learned a ton, a lot of food for thought, which are all components of a great conversation. And I'm certain that for anyone who's stayed till this long, they will take back a ton of learnings. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me and for having unconventional examples of entrepreneurship for your audiences. Love that you had that with me and with Neil earlier and other people as well.
No, thank you so much. You're doing amazing work as a team, and I'm so glad we could have you on the show. Thank you. Cheers. Hello. If you made it this far, you've probably watched the entire episode. And if you've done that, I'm really grateful. I and my team try to put in a lot of effort to ensure that we can bring the best quality content to you. So if you liked the episode, if you watched it thus far, my request to you is to share it with people, to subscribe to the channel, and to ensure that we can keep growing. We are everything and anything only because of you, our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll keep bringing to you amazing content. Cheers.